During BTS's trainee era, Bang Si-hyuk grilled Jungkook with 10 bizarre questions, but his responses stunned the producer into silence. Why do you think shadows follow people, Jungkook? The voice rang out like a thunderclap in the sterile, soundproof room. Bang Si-hyuk didn't blink. His large frame was draped in shadow, standing just beyond the reach of the single overhead light. In front of him, Jungkook, 15, sleepless, soaked in sweat, stood still, barely breathing, his fists trembling at his sides. The rehearsal had ended 2 hours ago. Everyone else had gone home. But not Jungkook. Not tonight. The room smelled of dust, damp wood, and ambition. Because they're scared to lead, Jungkook replied, his voice steady but quiet. There was a beat of silence. Then a slow, deliberate chuckle. Bang Si-hyuk leaned forward, eyes sharp as knives. Interesting. It wasn't praise. It was an opening shot. Bang Si-hyuk stepped into the light with a clipboard in hand, no music, no lyrics, just 10 lines scrawled in red ink. No explanations. No hints. Only this strange interrogation, like a trial of the soul that no other trainee had ever mentioned. Jungkook didn't ask why. He never did. He had learned early that questions were currency and silence was survival. You're in the middle of a forest. You hear a piano playing, but there's no one there. What do you do? Jungkook blinked once. Then twice. He stared at the floor for a moment. I dance, he said. Why? Because something has to acknowledge the music. Bang Si-hyuk's pen paused. Outside the room, rain struck the windows like distant applause. Jungkook's breath was shallow, his chest rising and falling with the effort of holding back everything else he wanted to say. That he hadn't slept in 3 days. That his knees were raw. That every time he closed his eyes, he saw the debut stage too far, too bright, too big. That he missed his mother. That he didn't know who he was supposed to become. But none of that mattered now. What do you do if your dream becomes someone else's nightmare? Jungkook hesitated. I wake up. And? I learn to dream better. Bang Si-hyuk's fingers twitched on the clipboard. No smile. No nod. Just silence again. The questions came like punches now. Would you give up everything if the world asked you to? If I believed in the world. What color is your fear? Transparent. Why? Because it hides in everything. Each answer came without a stutter. He didn't know where they came from, maybe from the long nights of watching others leave while he stayed behind. Maybe from the silence between him and his father. Or maybe from the cracked mirror above his dorm bed where he'd whisper promises to a reflection he no longer recognized. Who are you when no one's looking? That's when I become me. That one hit hard. Bang Si-hyuk's jaw clenched just slightly. The rain had turned into a storm. Thunder rolled across the building's skeleton. Jungkook's voice was quieter now, but not weak. Measured. Like someone learning to wield something dangerous. Do you think pain makes good art? Pain makes truth, he said. Truth makes good art. Bang Si-hyuk stopped pacing. For the first time in the interrogation, he looked directly into Jungkook's eyes. There was a flicker of something, a recognition, maybe? Or fear. Or a memory he hadn't meant to revisit. What if I told you you'll never be enough? Jungkook didn't flinch. Then I'd prove you wrong every day. That did it. The clipboard fell to Bang Si-hyuk's side. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. For a moment, it was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. He had asked these questions not to test knowledge, but to strip illusion. To see who was playing a role and who had something raw enough to survive what was coming. And now, in front of him stood a boy who didn't just survive the questions, he swallowed them and turned them into something else. Bang Si-hyuk stepped back. Go home, Jungkook, he said quietly. Jungkook didn't move. Not yet. Bang Si-hyuk's voice softened, almost a whisper now. We'll talk again. Someday. Then he turned and walked away, the storm outside following him down the hallway like a living thing. Jungkook stood alone under the flickering light, heart hammering, a strange heat rising behind his eyes. He didn't know why those questions had come, or what they meant, but he knew one thing. Something had changed, and it wasn't over. Not even close. You lied to me. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Jungkook spun around. The rehearsal room, dimly lit with flickering fluorescent lights, suddenly felt like a trap. His pulse quickened as he faced the voice. Min Jung-hee stood there, arms crossed, eyes colder than the mirrors that lined the wall behind him. Sweat dripped from his jaw, a headphone wire dangling from one ear like a forgotten chain. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. You said it was just a private talk, Jung-hee continued, stepping closer. You said Bang Si-hyuk wanted feedback on a dance sequence. Not whatever the hell that was. I didn't know, Jungkook managed. I didn't expect. You don't just walk into the tiger's den by accident, Jungkook. Youngi's voice wasn't raised, but it cut deeper that way, flat, sharp, slicing through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Behind him, the door shut with a faint click, sealing them in. Do you know how many people would kill to be pulled into that room? Youngi whispered. How many of us have been here for years waiting for a moment like that? I didn't ask for it. Jungkook shot back, louder than he meant to. He just called me in. That's not how this place works, Youngi said. Nobody gets summoned unless there's something being tested. Or something being broken. Jungkook's breath came hard now. He looked down at his calloused hands, the red blisters that lined his palms like battle scars. He didn't know why he had been chosen, and maybe that was what scared him the most. The door swung open again. Jimin stepped in, eyebrows raised, sensing the energy like electricity in the air. What's going on? Youngi didn't even glance at him. Your golden boy here got invited to the judgment room. Jimin blinked, then looked at Jungkook. Seriously? Not by choice, Jungkook muttered. Youngi took a deep breath, dragging a hand down his face. The fury was still there, but now something else had crept into his voice, exhaustion. You don't get it, Youngi said quietly. It's not a compliment. It's a warning. He turned and left without another word. Jimin exhaled slowly, walking over to sit beside Jungkook. They didn't speak for a while. The hum of the speakers filled the silence. He used to think he'd be the center, Jimin said softly finally. When he raps, it's like fire. You've heard him. Jungkook nodded. But then they told him his face wouldn't sell. That the market wanted something prettier. Jungkook looked down again. The weight of expectation, of jealousy, of quiet resentment pressed against him like gravity. I didn't mean to, eh? You didn't, Jimin said. But that won't stop them from resenting you. Later that night, the dorm was silent. The hallway lights flickered every few seconds, casting shifting shadows along the floor like ghosts walking in loops. Jungkook sat alone in the kitchen, a cup of cold instant ramen untouched before him. He thought of the clipboard. Of those questions. He didn't even know if he had answered them honestly or if the answers had just been what he thought Bang Si-hyuk wanted to hear. Then came the whisper. You're not ready. It wasn't from behind. It came from within. He looked up sharply. No one was there. But his chest tightened. He wasn't paranoid, but lately something had changed. The walls felt thinner. The stares from other trainees lasted longer. The mirrors in the practice rooms didn't reflect just one person anymore, they reflected potential. Danger. Threat. The next morning, the schedule was brutal. Dance practice at 5 a.m., vocal training at 8, personal evaluations at 1 p.m. Namjoon pulled Jungkook aside after their second round of choreography. You've got to watch your back now, he said bluntly. Hyung's got his eye on you. You mean Bang PD? No, Namjoon said, adjusting his cap. Everyone else. A week passed. The questions never came up again. Bang Si-hyuk acted as though the interrogation never happened. He gave direction in his usual cold, analytical tone, occasionally pausing only to correct Jungkook's stance or give a vague nod during vocal runs. But everything was different. They were recording background vocals one afternoon when Jungkook noticed something strange. In the glass reflection of the recording booth, Bang Si-hyuk wasn't watching him. He was watching the monitor where replay footage of their last group dance was running. Frame by frame. Only Jungkook. His limbs. His turns. His smile. After the session, Taehyung caught up with him outside. You're being dissected, he said cheerfully, too cheerfully. Like a frog in biology class. Jungkook chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then came the bombshell. An anonymous post surfaced on an underground trainee forum. It was detailed. Too detailed. A secret meeting. A list of 10 questions. A test to determine who would be the frontman of the group, maybe even the center. The post ended with a single line, they've already chosen the one. The rest of us are just filling space. Jungkook's phone exploded with messages. Some were passive-aggressive. Some direct. So it's true. Enjoy your spotlight, golden child. Did you sleep your way in? He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he locked it, placed it face down on the desk, and quietly threw up in the bathroom sink. When he came out, Hoseok was waiting. You okay? Jungkook nodded. It was a lie. Hoseok didn't push. But he didn't leave either. You think you're the first? He said finally. Every group has one. The chosen one. The threat. He walked over, placed a bottle of water in front of Jungkook. But not everyone survives it. Later that night, Jungkook stood in front of the mirror in the dorm bathroom, staring at his reflection. He peeled back the edges of the face he wore in front of the world, the polite smile, the perfect bow, the glowing potential. What lay beneath was something messier. More afraid. More alive. Then the knock came. He opened the door. Bang Si-hyuk stood there. Alone. No clipboard this time. No entourage. Just him. Come with me. Jungkook followed him down the hallway. They didn't go to the office. Not the studio. But a room he'd never been in before, behind a locked gray door at the end of the hallway. Inside was silence. And a wall covered in photos. Not just his. Yoongi, Namjoon, Jimin, Taehyung, Hyuk, Jeon. Photos from practice. From rest. From moments they thought were private. This is the vault, Hyuk said quietly. This is where we decide. Jungkook's stomach dropped. What is this? This is where your story gets written. He stepped forward, pointing to one photo. Jungkook, after a fall during dance practice, sitting alone with his hand pressed to his ankle, tears just beginning to fall. You didn't cry for the camera, Hyuk said. You cried because you thought no one was looking. That's when you're real. Jungkook's voice cracked. Why are you showing me this? Because you passed. A beat. You were never supposed to, Hyuk continued. But you did. He turned to face him, eyes colder now. So now you have a choice. The room felt like a coffin. Do you want to be great? He asked. Or do you want to be loved? Jungkook swallowed hard. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why can't I be both? Hyuk smiled. That's the first wrong answer you've given. He walked out. Jungkook remained there, alone, in the room of shadows and still frames, with a question that would haunt him far longer than the 10 before it. Because for the first time he realized this wasn't a debut. It was a war. The scream wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Human enough to send chills through bone, unnatural enough to make every muscle in Jungkook's body seize as he jerked awake. It was 3:17 a.m. He was lying in bed, the sheets tangled around his legs like restraints. His roommate Jeon was still fast asleep across the room, breathing slowly, unaware. Jungkook sat up, heart racing. He wasn't sure what he had heard. A cry? A voice? Or maybe just the pressure of weeks crushing him from the inside, hallucinations birthing themselves out of exhaustion. But it felt real. Too real. He threw on a hoodie and stepped out into the hallway, guided by instinct more than logic. The dorm was quiet, but something buzzed beneath the silence, a tension in the walls, a pulse in the floorboards. He followed it, bare feet padding across cold tile, until he found himself in the studio on the 3rd floor. There was light under the door. He opened it slowly. Inside, Namjoon was standing at the far end, surrounded by lyric sheets scattered like fallen snow. The glow of the screen behind him painted his face in silver and blue, shadows under his eyes so deep they looked carved. He turned when he heard the door. Jungkook didn't speak. Neither did Namjoon. Then finally, Namjoon sighed and picked up one of the crumpled pages from the floor. Tell me, he said, do you think we were chosen because we're talented, or because we're broken? Jungkook hesitated. I think, he said slowly, they saw how far we'd go to prove we weren't. Namjoon gave a small, humorless smile. That's the right answer. He handed the page over. Jungkook scanned the lines, lyrics, scrawled in uneven ink. I'm not afraid of the fall. Just afraid no one will see it. If I disappear in the noise, will the silence even miss me? Jungkook looked up and Namjoon met his eyes. I've rewritten it 8 times. Nothing sounds honest anymore. You've been in here all night? Every night. Jungkook didn't ask why. He knew. Knew that Namjoon bore the weight of being the leader, the anchor, the translator of pain into poetry. Knew that behind every performance was a war with the self. Knew that silence was not peace, but a place where screams waited. Then Namjoon said something unexpected. They're setting us up. Jungkook frowned. What? There's a reason they're forcing more group evaluations. Why they've suddenly made us redo choreography that passed last week. They're waiting for someone to snap. Jungkook swallowed. You think they want us to turn on each other? No, Namjoon said, voice low. I think they want to see who survives the fallout. The next day, the air in the practice room was heavy. Hyuk was unusually quiet. Taehyung didn't joke. Yoongi showed up late, eyes bloodshot. Jimin kept glancing at Jungkook like he was waiting for something to break. Hyuk didn't attend the rehearsal. Instead, a new creative director named Mr. Kwon arrived, sleek suit, high cheekbones, and a voice like wet steel. You're no longer trainees, he said flatly. You're candidates. That means there will be cuts. Silence fell like a blade. No one's safe, he continued. Not even the favorites. Jungkook didn't move. Later, after hours of drilling choreography that made their knees scream and lungs burn, Mr. Kwon called him aside. You're too soft in the second verse, he said. Your smile is too sincere. I need hunger, not gratitude. Jungkook frowned. Isn't sincerity what makes it real? Mr. Kwon laughed short, sharp. You're not here to be real. You're here to sell a dream. Jungkook looked at him, long and hard. Whose dream? The director's smile never reached his eyes. You tell me. The next 2 weeks were hell. Not just physically but psychologically. They began assigning solo evaluations in a black room with a single camera and a time limit of 15 minutes. No feedback was given. No results were shown. But the pressure began to show. Yoongi snapped first. It happened during a vocal session when the producer criticized his falsetto once too often. He slammed the headphones down and stormed out, muttering words that made everyone freeze. I didn't come here to be dissected like a goddamn science experiment. He didn't show up the next day. Or the day after that. Rumors exploded. He left. He got kicked. He punched someone. No one knew. No one dared ask. Then came the surprise. Jungkook was told he'd perform a duet with Jimin for a company event, a live test performance in front of industry guests and executives. They had 3 days to prepare. The moment they were alone in the dance studio, Jimin turned to him, "Eyes stormy. Why you?" Jungkook looked up from the choreography sheet. "What? Why not taehyung? Or Hyuk? You think I don't know what this is? I didn't ask for this." "Maybe not. But you're still getting it." Their movements that day were rigid. Mismatched. Tense. Jimin kept missing beats. Jungkook's vocals cracked. They both blamed each other without saying a word. By the third night, frustration boiled over. During a break, Jimin threw his water bottle across the room. It shattered against the mirror, droplets spraying like blood. "You walk around like you're trying to be perfect," he said, voice trembling. "Like you're scared of disappointing ghosts." Jungkook stared at him. "You think I want to be the center?" he said. "You think I want to be stared at like I'm a weapon pointed at everyone's future?" He stepped closer. "I'm terrified. Every damn day. Of failing. Of being wrong. Of waking up and realizing I was just a placeholder in someone else's fantasy." Jimin blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean it." But Jungkook kept going. "I don't want to be the reason you hate waking up. I just want to make it through this without losing myself." Silence. Then Jimin sank to the floor, breathing hard, shoulders shaking. "They told me I was too short. That I'd be backup. That I'd never stand out unless I danced like I was on fire." "I know," Jungkook said. He sat beside him. "I see it. Every time you move. You're not dancing to be seen. You're dancing to survive." Jimin laughed, bitter, broken. "Then maybe we survive together." And just like that, the air shifted. The next morning, they performed the duet live. It was imperfect. Raw. Flawed in the kind of way that made people feel something real. At the end, the room was silent. Then, a single clap. Banksy Hyuk from the back of the room, his expression unreadable. Later, he pulled Jungkook aside. "You're not the strongest dancer," he said. "Not the best vocalist." Jungkook braced himself. "But you're the one who makes the others reach higher." Jungkook blinked. "I don't know if that's a compliment." Banksy Hyuk looked at him. "It's not. It's a responsibility." That night, Jungkook stood on the rooftop, the city sprawling below like an open wound of neon and steel. He felt Jimin join him, then taehyung, then Hyuk. Namjoon and Jeon arrived last. No words. Just a circle. Then Namjoon broke the silence. "We need a pact." "A pact?" Hyuk asked. "If they're going to pit us against each other," Namjoon said, "then we decide how the story goes. Together." Taehyung raised a brow. "You mean, like brothers?" "Exactly," Jungkook said. One by one, they agreed. No betrayal. No sabotage. No silence in the face of pain. No one gets left behind. And as they stood there, 6 shadows against the pulsing lights of Seoul, Jungkook realized something. This wasn't just about debut anymore. It was about who they would become on the way there. What pieces of themselves they would have to break, bury, or burn. And what would be left if they made it through. The storm came without warning. Not the kind that split the sky and soaked the streets, but the kind that swept through quiet spaces, disguised in whispers, and detonated reputations like landmines. Jungkook was halfway through a vocal run when Namjoon burst into the practice room, face pale and tight with fury. "Turn your phone on," he said. "Now." Jungkook blinked, pulled the device from his hoodie pocket, and tapped the screen. Notifications screamed at him, hundreds of them vibrating in waves of panic. A video was spreading. A leaked internal recording. 32 seconds. He tapped the link. What he saw drained the heat from his body. Banksy Hyuk's voice. "Flat. I see. He has the right face, the timing, the hunger. He's not the best, but he's the most malleable. We can shape him. Turn him into what we need. The others? They're too aware. Too self-willed." Then a clip of Jungkook. His face in profile. In the black room under the lens. He wants it too much. That's his flaw. But also his fuel. The screen went black. No timestamp. No context. No mercy. Namjoon looked at him. "It's everywhere." Even the managers are panicking. We don't know who leaked it. Jungkook's mouth went dry. Do they think it was me? Not yet, Namjoon said. But they will. If we don't control the fallout. An hour later, they were called into an emergency meeting. The small conference room smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Every trainee with potential for the final lineup was there. Yoongi had returned without warning that morning, eyes unreadable, shoulders stiff. Hyuk entered last. No clipboard this time. Just his silence. He stared at Jungkook for a long moment. Not with anger. Not even accusation. Just calculation. Then he addressed the room. I will say this once, he said. That footage was recorded without authorization. It was part of a private executive discussion. The person who leaked it will be found. And when they are His voice hardened. They will not debut. Ever. Taehyung raised a hand. Shouldn't we be discussing what it means? Hyuk turned his gaze to him. Do you think this is a democracy, Kim Taehyung? Jimin shifted uncomfortably. But everyone's seen it, Hoseok said. The industry people. Even fans on private forums. They're calling Jungkook the puppet prince. That name hit like a punch. Jungkook clenched his jaw but said nothing. You should all be more concerned about your own reputations, Hyuk said. We are watching everyone now. Behavior. Loyalty. Response. He looked directly at Jungkook again. This is your moment to define yourself. Then he left. No apology. No context. No denial. Just an order. And a threat. Back in the dorms, silence reigned. Even breathing felt like a betrayal. Jungkook sat at the edge of his bunk, staring at the floor. Taehyung, Hoseok, and Jimin were in the room too, but none of them spoke. Until finally, Yoongi entered. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You knew something like this could happen, he said. You let them make you the centerpiece. Did you think that wouldn't paint a target on your back? Jungkook stood. I never asked for this. You didn't stop it either. I was a kid when they pulled me in, Jungkook snapped. I didn't understand what it meant to be the one. I still don't. Yoongi stepped closer. They don't pick favorites for your sake. They pick them to control the room. To divide us. Then why come back? Jungkook shot back. Why stay in a system you clearly hate? Yoongi's eyes burned. Because I'm not done yet. And then he said something that made everyone freeze. I was in that room too. What? Namjoon appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowed. Yoongi nodded. A year before Jungkook. Same chair. Same questions. Different answers. I failed. No, Jimin said, stunned. You never told us. I didn't want to, Yoongi said. Because I wasn't ready to be honest about why I failed. He turned to Jungkook. You answered like someone who had nothing to lose. That's why he picked you. But now? You have everything to lose. That night, Jungkook couldn't sleep. He kept hearing that name. Puppet Prince. He stood up around 2 a.m. and found himself wandering to the same rooftop where the pact was made. To his surprise, Hyuk was already there. The CEO didn't turn when Jungkook approached. He just kept staring at the city. I assume you're angry. Jungkook didn't answer. I won't apologize, Hyuk said. Because I meant every word. You were malleable. And that's not an insult. It means you adapt. I'm not clay. No, Hyuk said. You're something better. You're fire. Fire takes the shape of its container, but it also burns down what tries to hold it. He turned then, finally, eyes sharp as broken glass. I didn't make you a puppet, Jungkook. I gave you a stage. What you do on it, that's on you. Jungkook stepped forward. Did you leak the footage? Hyuk laughed. If I wanted you destroyed, I wouldn't do it anonymously. Then who did? I have my suspicions. And he said nothing else. 2 days later, a folder appeared on the dance studio piano. Unlabeled. Inside were transcripts, text messages, secret audio files, all pointing to one name. Lee Dong-hyun. A backup trainee. Quiet. Kind. Invisible in most rooms. But always present. Always listening. And more importantly, recently cut. The betrayal felt surgical. The team confronted him privately. Dong-hyun didn't deny it. You all pretend you're brothers, he said. But that room? That tape? That was proof it's just a game. That's why I leaked it. To show the rest of us what we already knew, there are no equals here. No, Jimin said softly. There aren't. Dong-hyun stared at him. And neither are there kings. He left that night. But the damage lingered. Trust was fractured. Bonds strained. And yet something else happened too. Jungkook stood in the practice room the next evening, the others watching. No music played. Just his voice. I'm not your rival, he said. And I don't want to be your leader. But I need to be honest. I want this more than anything. And I'm willing to bleed for it. He paused. But not at your expense. Namjoon stepped forward. Then don't bleed alone. Yoongi nodded. We move as one. Or we don't move at all. One by one, they joined him. And just like that, the noise quieted. For a moment. But behind every silence, another storm waited. From today forward, said the woman in the black suit, you are no longer 7. Jungkook froze, fingers tightening around the sweat-soaked towel draped over his shoulder. The rehearsal room had no air conditioning, and yet the chill that sank into his spine wasn't from temperature. It was from that voice, calm, clipped, merciless. The woman's name was Ms. Kang, senior strategist. Brought in directly from the label's Tokyo branch, rumored to be a former intelligence operative before she joined the entertainment world. She was known internally as the scalpel, precise, cold, and only called when a clean removal was required. She stood at the front of the practice room now, heels clicking against the polished floor, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning them like assets on a ledger. The company has decided, she said. The final lineup will be 6. Jungkook's heart dropped. Around him, the others stood motionless, Taehyung with his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he might crack a molar, Jimin blinking as if trying to undo the last sentence by sheer will, Hyuk gripping the hem of his shirt until the fabric twisted. Namjoon stayed eerily still, the unreadable mask of a man who knew this day would come. Yoongi simply turned his head once, slowly, as if confirming that this was not a nightmare. Only Jeon looked directly at her, eyes sharp and angry. No explanation? He asked. She looked at him. None required. This isn't a company. It's a butcher house, he said. Ms. Kang's lips curved into the faintest smile. Emotions have no ROI. She turned and left. Just like that. As the door closed behind her, silence sucked the oxygen from the room. 7 shadows remained, but only 6 were supposed to walk forward. What the hell do we do now? Jimin finally asked. No one had an answer. 3 hours passed. No one left the room. They trained harder. Longer. Like movement could force the world to make sense again. But the doubt crept in like poison. Who was being cut? Why wasn't it announced? Were they being tested again? By midnight, the tension exploded. You think it's me, don't you? Jeon said suddenly. You all do. Taehyung looked up from the floor. Hyungd. No, say it. I'm the oldest. The least marketable. I'm not the best dancer or singer. The company's been side-eyeing me for months. No one's saying that, Jungkook said, voice shaking. Jeon laughed hollow, bitter. Please. You think I don't hear the whispers? The way the staff looks at me like I'm a relic in a group of gems? He turned to Namjoon. You knew this was coming. You've been distant. Were you preparing for it? Preparing to lead without me? Stop, Namjoon said quietly. This is what they want. They want us to unravel. Fight. Make their job easier. But what if they're right? Jeon snapped. What if we've been fooling ourselves? Then we prove them wrong, Jungkook said. Jeon looked at him. Easy for you to say. You're their golden ticket. Stepped forward. You think that helps me sleep? You think being the face makes this easier? It makes it worse. Every time I succeed, someone calls it rigged. Every time I fail, it's weaponized. You want to switch places with me? Take the spotlight and the noose that comes with it. Jeon was silent. Then Taehyung spoke. We make a deal. Right now. Everyone turned. No one leaves, he said. Even if one of us gets cut. We don't walk this debut unless we all walk it. What if we can't? Hyuk asked. Then we make it so we can, Taehyung said. We threaten to walk as a unit. That's career suicide, Yoongi muttered. The company will blacklist us. Maybe, Taehyung said. But they need us. Not just individually. As a group. That's what makes us dangerous. There was a beat of silence. Namjoon sighed. Then we're not just trainees anymore. We're a syndicate. And so it began. Operation Uncut. For the next 10 days, they performed perfectly in public. Smiled at cameras. Nodded at producers. But privately, they launched their plan. Namjoon reached out to a junior staffer he trusted, Minseo, who ran the internal scheduling app. In exchange for silence, she slipped them a list. Internal evaluations, CEO appointments, marketing projections. One name had been quietly removed from the final lineup documents. Jeon. But next to his name, an annotation, media repositioning candidate. They're not firing me, Jeon said after reading it. They're moving me, maybe an actor, or host. That's worse, Jimin said. They're turning you into an accessory. Not if we stop them, Jungkook said. And then came the wildcard and industry leak. An anonymous insider sent a tip to a mid-level entertainment blog, BTS trainee lineup being manipulated. Cuts not based on talent, but optics. The post exploded. Forums caught fire. Fans, those who had been following the trainees since pre-debut, demanded answers. Hashtags trended. Hashtag let Jeon debut. Hashtag BTS deserves 7. Hashtag BangPD explain. The company panicked. Emergency meetings were called. Internal reviews launched. But no one could find the source of the leak. Because it wasn't from inside the company. It was Jungkook. Not directly. He sent it through a former high school friend who ran a K-pop gossip account. No paper trail. No suspicion. But the damage was done. 2 nights before the official lineup was to be announced, Bang Si-hyuk summoned them. All 7. He sat alone in a soundproof studio room. No executives. No assistants. Just him and the 7 boys who had, against every odds, become too united to break. You boys are more dangerous than I expected, he said. You forgot your place. No, Namjoon said. We remembered our worth. Bang Si-hyuk studied them, then turned to Jeon. You were never being cut. You were being repositioned. For the health of the brand. Jeon said nothing. Bang Si-hyuk leaned forward. But now your name is viral. Your story controversial. People want you in. A pause. Congratulations, he said. You just manipulated the narrative better than my own marketing team. The room was silent. Enjoy the win, Bang Si-hyuk said. But remember, every victory has a cost. He walked out. Jeon turned to the others, eyes wide. Did we just actually do it? We did, Jungkook said. Together. And for the first time in months, the air felt clean. But none of them noticed the small security camera above the speaker system, recording everything. And far away, in a quiet boardroom, Ms. Kang pressed pause on the footage. They're smarter than we thought, she said. And more loyal. The board member beside her nodded. Do we proceed? She smiled faintly. Yes, but from now on, we stop testing them as individuals. She folded her hands. We test them as a unit. The silence in the conference room wasn't just oppressive, it was weaponized. All 7 boys sat on one side of the long obsidian table. Across from them, not just Bang Si-hyuk, but 3 unfamiliar faces in expensive suits, their expressions unreadable. Ms. Kang stood near the wall, hands folded behind her back, watching them with the eyes of someone trained to detect a lie before it's spoken. On the center of the table, 7 identical envelopes. Inside, their contracts. Real ones this time. No more trainee terms. No more probationary clauses. These were debut contracts, multi-year, binding, and carefully worded. Each page was a maze of legal entanglement wrapped in promise and silence. Jungkook's throat was dry as he reached for his envelope. His name was printed in bold at the top. Jeon Jungkook. Date. Stamped. Seal. Unbroken. Bang Si-hyuk didn't smile. This is the final step. Once signed, your fate belongs to BTS. You will no longer be individuals. You will be one entity. One voice. Yoongi leaned forward, eyes narrow. And if we don't sign? You vanish, said one of the suited men flatly. The words echoed like a gunshot. Namjoon glanced at the others. Jungkook saw it. A flicker of doubt, fear, determination, all colliding behind the leader's usually calm face. No discussion? Jimin asked. No negotiation? Bang Si-hyuk raised an eyebrow. You think you have leverage? We are the leverage, Jeon said quietly. For a moment no one breathed. Then, to everyone's shock, Taehyung stood. Then let's talk terms. One of the men scoffed. This is not a negotiation. You're children. Taehyung tilted his head. Then why do you look nervous? The man stiffened. Ms. Kang finally spoke. Gentlemen, leave us. The 3 suits looked at her, then at Bang Si-hyuk. He gave a silent nod. They exited without another word. Now it was just the 8 of them. Ms. Kang stepped forward. You've forced our hand. Public sentiment is in your favor. The Jeon leak turned the tide. But don't mistake that for victory. Hoseok spoke for the first time. We never asked for a war. But you drew first blood. Ms. Kong nodded, slowly. Then let's end it with ink instead of wounds. She slid a folder forward. Addendum clauses. Custom for each of you. A gesture of understanding. They opened the new documents. Jungkook's eyes widened as he scanned his. Autonomy in solo projects. Creative input in choreography decisions. A clause protecting against image manipulation. A review clause after 2 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was unprecedented. Why? Jungkook whispered. Ms. Kong looked at him. Because we tested you, and you passed. No more tests, Namjoon said. None, she agreed. You're no longer assets. You're investments. Jungkook stared at the page. He thought of everything. The whispers, the betrayals, the sleepless nights, the fear of being molded into something he couldn't recognize. And now, for the first time, he was holding a choice. Not a command. He picked up the pen. And he signed. One by one, the others followed. 7 signatures, aligned on the final page. Packed written in ink, sealed in silence. When it was done, Ms. Kong nodded. Your training ends today. Hyuk stood. Your real war begins now. They left the room in silence. The building felt different now. The hallways longer. The air heavier. The weight of being official was crushing but somehow exhilarating. They didn't speak until they reached the rooftop. The city below gleamed like a circuit board, alive with millions of indifferent stories. None of them knew where they were going. But at least now they'd be going together. Jeon broke the silence first. What happens if we fail? Namjoon looked at him. Then we fail as 7. Taehyung grinned. And if we win? Jungkook smiled, the first real smile in weeks. Then they'll never be able to write a script without us again. The first sign of what they'd stepped into came just a week later. Their first official group schedule post-signing wasn't a performance. It was a press junket. A senior journalist from a top-tier entertainment outlet had requested an exclusive sit-down with BTS. They arrived in coordinated black suits, tailored but not too flashy. The company insisted on projecting unity and humility. The interviewer was Park Mira, a woman known for dismantling idols on camera with polite, surgical cruelty. She welcomed them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The camera blinked red, and the knives came out. So, Jungkook, she said almost warmly. What's it like being the youngest and the most favored? Do you worry your success will come at the cost of the others' dreams? Jungkook didn't blink. I worry more about forgetting why I started. She turned to Jeon. You nearly got cut. Do you think you truly earned your spot? Jeon smiled. I don't know anyone who's earned anything alone. Yoongi, she continued. Critics say you lack idol visuals. Does that bother you? No, he said. But it bothers people who still think idols are mannequins. The room stirred. Even the production team shifted in their seats. Park Mira smiled wider. You're well-trained. Namjoon leaned forward, elbows on the table. We're not trained. We're forged. That interview went viral. Not because of controversy, but because of something rarer. Truth. The fans felt it. The industry felt it. And so did the people in the highest towers. Back at the company headquarters, Ms. Kong stood in a room alone, watching the footage. Hyuk entered, wordless, standing beside her. They're not idols anymore, she said. No, he replied. They're a phenomenon in the making. She turned. But phenomena are unpredictable. He nodded. That's what makes them dangerous. That night, Jungkook couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, headphones in, listening to a beat Yoongi had shared just hours earlier. It was raw, messy, unfinished, but it pulsed with something that felt alive. His phone buzzed. A message from Namjoon. Young lines meeting tomorrow. You don't have to come, but you can. Jungkook stared at the message, then typed, I'll be there. We sign together. We lead together. He hit send. And in that moment, somewhere between fear and freedom, he felt it again. Not the pressure, not the scrutiny, but the pulse. The same one he felt the first time he walked into that practice room with nothing but a backpack and a dream. The same one he felt under the spotlight, sweating and uncertain, singing like his life depended on it. The same one that whispered, "This is only the beginning." The first showcase wasn't just a test. It was a trap. They'd been told it was a closed-door industry debut. No media, no fans, just executives, scouts, and producers. A taste of BTS before the formal reveal. A warm-up, a formality. It wasn't. The second they stepped onto the stage, Jungkook knew something was wrong. Too many lights, too many cameras. The front row, supposedly reserved for big-hit executives and select label partners, was lined with entertainment journalists, all armed with high-end cameras, some already live-streaming. Jungkook caught the flash of a lens trained directly on him. Zoomed in, hungry, dissecting. He could hear Namjoon's breath catch. The others didn't even have time to exchange glances before the music began. They moved anyway. Choreography took over where panic tried to bloom. Every kick, turn, and beat was executed with mechanical perfection. But the energy was off. Stale. Too rehearsed. Jungkook felt it like a stone in his chest. Their unity, the fire they'd built in silence, wasn't reaching the audience. It was being filtered, controlled. He glanced at the side monitor during a transition. What he saw made his blood run cold. Their vocals weren't live. They'd been pre-recorded. It wasn't a showcase. It was a presentation. Scripted. Sanitized. Safe. After the final pose, the lights cut out before they could bow. The curtain dropped. Applause was minimal. Polite. Surgical. Backstage was chaos. Staff running around with headsets and clipboards, pretending the betrayal hadn't just happened. Bang Si-hyuk was nowhere to be seen. Ms. Kang was. She met them in the dressing room, arms folded, face blank. What the hell was that? Jean said, towel around his neck, chest heaving. Control, she replied simply. You didn't even tell us it was being filmed live. Jimin spat. We didn't want you to choke, she said. Namjoon stepped forward, eyes blazing. You muzzled our voices. Literally. It was strategic, she said. The public isn't ready yet. You're still rough around the edges. Then let them see the roughness, Jungkook said. That's real. That's messy, she corrected. Messy is human, Yoongi growled. Do you think people are going to fall for a cleaned-up lie? They've seen it 1,000 times already. We're not here to be just another polished product. Ms. Kang studied them. We didn't choose you to be like everyone else, she said. But that doesn't mean you can do things your way. Not yet. Then when? Jungkook asked. When are we allowed to be real? Her silence was answer enough. They walked out without waiting for dismissal. Back at the dorms, the mood was volcanic. Jean paced the hallway, ranting to no one and everyone. Hyuk punched the couch cushion over and over again. Jimin sat on the kitchen floor, arms around his knees, eyes unfocused. Taehyung broke 3 eggs in a row trying to make food, then gave up. Yoongi retreated to the studio alone. And Jungkook stared at the mirror in the bathroom until his reflection stopped feeling human. Then Namjoon called a meeting. No table this time. No hierarchy. Just 7 boys in a circle on the dorm floor. The smell of sweat and cheap ramen lingering in the air. We can't keep pretending this is just about talent, Namjoon said. They're building something without us. They'll slap our faces on it, but it won't be us. It'll be the idea of us. Jungkook nodded. Then we need to show them the difference. How? Taehyung asked. They control the cameras, the editors, the songs. Yoongi sat up. They don't control what leaks. Everyone turned. You want to go rogue? Hyuk asked. Not publicly, Yoongi said. But what if we gave someone a different version of that performance? One they can't sanitize. The rehearsal footage, Jungkook realized. Exactly. I know where it's stored, Jimin said. In the secondary archive. Mincio showed me once. I can get in. Even if we get it out, Jean said. How do we make sure it lands right? Namjoon held up his phone. I've got a contact. Independent music blog. Old friend. No connections to the label. He's waiting. Jungkook's heart raced. This was the line. Once they crossed it, there was no going back. But maybe they'd already crossed it the moment they signed those contracts. Maybe this was them fighting for the version of BTS that was born in sweat, scars, and stolen moments of truth. They voted. Unanimous. 3 nights later, the rehearsal version of the BTS showcase leaked online. It was raw. Rough vocals. Uncut angles. Flaws. Perfection. Realness. It exploded. The internet lit up. This is what idols should be. I felt something watching this version. Their pain feels like mine. Why did the official showcase look so fake in comparison? Hashtags trended globally. The official version posted by the label was downvoted into oblivion. Bang Si-hyuk summoned them the next morning. No assistants. No cameras. Just him, behind a massive desk, fingers interlocked. You're playing a dangerous game, he said. Jungkook spoke first. We're not playing. You are. You think you're the first group to rebel? Bang Si-hyuk asked. You're not. But most of them didn't survive it. Maybe we won't either, Namjoon said. But we'll go down swinging. Bang Si-hyuk stood. You want to control your image? Fine. From now on, the consequences are yours too. He handed Namjoon a folder. Tour schedule. Promotion plans. Song drafts. Marketing layouts. You want freedom? Then take the wheel. Namjoon opened the folder and froze. Jungkook leaned over to look. At the bottom of the schedule, a showcase in Los Angeles. 5 weeks away. Global debut. Prove to me this is more than an ego trip, Bang Si-hyuk said. Prove you can carry this. And I'll never interfere again. Namjoon looked up. And if we fail? Then I bury you in your own legend. They walked out of that room as something new. Not idols. Not rebels. Architects. Back at the dorm, no one celebrated. The weight of the folder crushed any excitement. 5 weeks to prepare for a global debut. Minimal label support. Maximum exposure. Every eye waiting for them to stumble. But it didn't scare them. Not anymore. That night they didn't rehearse. They sat together, cross-legged in the dark, sharing the stories they hadn't told each other before. About fear, family, failure. Taehyung talked about his grandmother, who raised him like a son but never understood why he danced. Yoongi admitted he once pawned his keyboard to afford rent during training. Hoseok confessed he nearly walked out the night his mother cried on the phone, begging him to come home. Jean said nothing for a long time, then simply, I kept thinking I was holding everyone back. Namjoon told them about a poem he wrote the night before their first group performance. How he tore it up because it felt like dreaming too soon. Jimin said he once tried to starve himself for 2 days after a trainer told him his body wasn't good enough for center. Jungkook told them that sometimes, when he stood on stage, he still felt like a fan who snuck into someone else's dream. And then Yoongi said the words that none of them had dared to say aloud. Even if this ends tomorrow, we'll know we lived it our way. Jungkook slept soundly that night for the first time in months. No nightmares. Only the quiet hum of something real growing under his skin. Purpose. They had 5 weeks. And the world wasn't ready. The plane touched down at LAX with the weight of 7 hearts beating out of sync. The windows of the jet gleamed under the California sun, a world away from the fluorescent shadows of their Seoul rehearsal rooms. But if the skies outside were blue and endless, the cabin inside was wound tight with silent tension. No jokes, no smiles, only preparation, only war. Jungkook sat by the window, earphones in, though he hadn't played music in hours. He watched the airport crews move like chess pieces on the tarmac. His hand, resting on the armrest, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation too big to be contained. Yoongi sat beside him, head tilted back, eyes closed, but Jungkook could tell from the tension in his jaw that he wasn't asleep. Namjoon stood before immigration holding a black folder marked with BTS schedules, bios, and contingency plans. The customs officer, a stout man in his late 50s, scanned the passports slowly, eyes flicking up at each member with a disinterest that bordered on condescension. You're a band? the officer asked. Namjoon smiled politely. A group. The man shrugged. Plenty of those come through. Most go home disappointed. Yoongi murmured under his breath. Guess we'll make him eat those words. They were met by two representatives from HYBE's US liaison team. Polished, smiling, carrying clipboards and offering hand sanitizer and hotel room keys like peace offerings. Their names were Eric and Lara, and they greeted the group with American enthusiasm that felt suspiciously like distraction. You'll be staying at the London in West Hollywood, Eric announced. 2 suites, top floor, soundproof. We've arranged for 24-hour car service and light press exposure leading up to the showcase. Namjoon cut in. We said no press. Lara didn't flinch. Only brief interviews. Controlled settings. No, Jungkook said sharply. No distractions. Eric and Lara exchanged a glance, as if mentally updating the profile they'd clearly memorized before meeting them. At the hotel, the staff bowed like they were greeting royalty. Bellboys rushed to carry luggage. Paparazzi buzzed across the street like insects. The air was warm, but every breath felt like it came with a price tag. Inside the suite, the curtains were drawn. Soundproof or not, they didn't speak for a long time. Hyuk stood at the balcony, watching traffic. Taehyung collapsed onto the couch and pulled a blanket over his head. Jeon opened the minibar and shut it again without taking anything. Jimin finally broke the silence. Do you think they'll rig this one too? Namjoon answered without looking up. They can try. But this time, the camera's ours. They had 5 days until the showcase. It wasn't just another performance, it was a deliberate, calculated ambush. This wasn't about proving they could sing and dance. It was about proving they were more than what had been scripted for them. The venue was a historic theater on Sunset Boulevard. Renovated but still haunted by decades of failed dreams. The kind of place where legends once stumbled before they soared or vanished. During the first rehearsal, the sound tech stopped the track halfway through and adjusted a dial. You guys don't need auto-tune? No, Jungkook said, stepping off the platform. We need volume. The tech, a man named Tony who looked like he'd seen every kind of ego, nodded slowly. That's rare. After the second run, an intern from the production crew approached them hesitantly, holding a clipboard with a shake in her hand. I'm sorry, she stammered. But the producers asked if you'd be willing to lip-sync for the broadcast cut. Yoongi blinked once, slowly. Jimin stepped forward. No. It's standard protocol, she said. Just for the cameras. We're not standard, Taehyung said coldly. The girl scurried away. On the third night, their freedom was tested. At 1:30 a.m., Namjoon got a text from a blocked number. Control the youngest. Or we will. Jungkook was asleep, exhausted, curled up in a chair with his hoodie pulled over his face. Namjoon stared at the message for a long time. He didn't wake Jungkook. Instead, he called an emergency meeting on the rooftop. The cold wind slapped their faces awake. They're watching, Namjoon said, still trying to control the narrative. Jeon snorted. They're scared. They should be, Jimin said. But they're not bluffing, Namjoon replied. They'll find a way to clip us if we don't move first. Yoongi leaned against the railing. Then we cut deeper. The plan that formed that night wasn't just bold, it was reckless. They would perform their own version of the title track. A different arrangement, different verses, different ending, unapproved, unscripted. Namjoon would open with a spoken word intro, written the night before. Jungkook would take center for a stripped-down bridge. Yoongi would rap his verse in raw tempo. Jeon would sing a line originally meant to be auto-tuned, in falsetto, just to prove it didn't need polish. If they were going to go down, it would be in flames of their own making. The day of the showcase came like the final breath before drowning. The theater was full. Executives, reporters, American producers, cameras, everything. The room buzzed with anticipation, but underneath it, an edge of cynicism. BTS was the underdog, a last-minute addition to the lineup. Most were there out of curiosity, not belief. Backstage, they didn't speak much, just looked at each other, and nodded. The lights went down. The screen lit up. A single spotlight hit the stage, and Namjoon stepped forward. No music yet, only his voice. When they said we'd never belong, we didn't argue. We listened. And then we built something so loud even their silence couldn't stop it. Pause. When they told us to fit the mold, we cracked it instead. Poured ourselves into the cracks. Became the leak they couldn't patch. Then the beat dropped. And the room changed. Jungkook hit the first chorus with a high note that shattered the ceiling. Yoongi's verse ripped into the room like an open wound. Taehyung screamed a line that wasn't in the lyrics. Jimin danced like the stage was a war zone and he was fighting ghosts. Jeon held the final note with tears in his eyes. And Hyuk, he didn't perform like an idol. He moved like someone who had seen heaven, been denied at the gate, and decided to dance in hell instead. When it ended, the room was silent. Then someone stood, clapped, another, and another, until the entire theater was on its feet. Backstage, Eric and Lara were waiting. You deviated from the script, Lara said. Namjoon nodded. Yes. You may be in breach of contract, Eric warned. Then sue us, Jungkook said. An hour later, they were back in the suite. Phones blowing up. Articles exploding. BTS just redefined what a debut can be. Korean group shocks industry with unfiltered, unapologetic showcase. They sang Live. They meant every word. And the room will never forget it. And the biggest headline. This is not a boy band. This is a movement. That night, Jungkook stood alone on the balcony, looking out at the city. He didn't feel young anymore. He didn't feel scared. He felt dangerous. A door creaked behind him. Yoongi stepped out, holding 2 bottles of sparkling water. I don't drink, he said, handing one over. But I'll toast to this. Jungkook clinked the bottle with his. To what? He asked. Yoongi looked out at the horizon. To being the storm they never saw coming. The morning after the Los Angeles showcase was not greeted with celebration. It was met with silence. The type that doesn't hum with peace, but quivers with consequence. They woke up in different rooms. The hotel still cloaked in the ghost of the night before. Jungkook stood in front of the full-length mirror, brushing his teeth with a towel slung around his neck, staring at the reflection of a boy who no longer looked like a trainee. Not even an idol. Something else had taken root behind his eyes. Fire, maybe. Or fury. Taehyung was pacing. Namjoon hadn't slept. Yoongi hadn't spoken a word since stepping off the stage. Jeon had sat in the same chair since dawn, unmoving, legs crossed like he was bracing for a verdict. Hyuk had headphones in, but no music played. Jimin clutched his phone like it was a detonator. Then came the call. It didn't come to any of them directly. Came to Lara. And when she entered their suite, it was with a look that could have carved ice through sunlight. Bang Si Hyuk is on a flight here, she said without preamble. He lands in 4 hours. She placed a single black USB drive on the coffee table. This is the raw footage from last night's performance. He wants to see it first. Alone. Unedited. Namjoon's jaw flexed. Jungkook finally spoke. Are we being pulled? Lara hesitated. Then shrugged. Depends what he sees. Hyuk stood. Then let him see everything. Lara looked at him. You should have told us you were going off script. Yoongi laughed. Dry. Bitter. You should have stopped writing for us. She flinched at that, then left. Time dragged like an open wound. No one moved. No one trained. They didn't even talk. It was waiting, the most dangerous kind. The kind that reminded them they weren't just performers. They were assets walking a wire over a volcano. At exactly 3:27 p.m., the call came again. Namjoon answered it on speaker. I want to see them, said Bang Si Hyuk. 10 words. No emotion. No promise. They were brought to the company's temporary LA office, just outside Burbank. The conference room was clinical, air-conditioned, devoid of windows. One chair at the head of the table. He sat in it. When they entered, he didn't look up right away. Just watched the performance again on a small monitor, elbows on the table, fingertips pressed together. It ended. The room was still. He looked up. I want to know whose idea it was. Namjoon spoke. Mine. Jungkook stepped forward. Ours. In the event of a breach of trust, the group may be terminated and individual contracts suspended indefinitely. Namjoon read it aloud, then asked, what qualifies as a breach? Bang Si-hyuk smiled. You'll know when it happens. That was the price. Power. With a guillotine hanging above it. Take it or leave it, he said. Jungkook signed first. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because he knew fear had no place in survival anymore. One by one, the others followed. When it was done, Bang Si-hyuk nodded. Then you better be ready for the fire. He walked out. And the door didn't slam, it whispered. That night, they didn't return to the hotel. They stayed at a small house Lara secured at the last minute, a one-story rental in the hills, far from the spotlight. There was no furniture, just a few blankets and some ramen. But there was peace. And purpose. They sat on the floor, backs against the walls, eating like they hadn't in days. Not just food, freedom. I feel like I can breathe again, Jimin whispered. Feels fake, Jeon replied. Like we're still in a simulation. Taehyung threw a pillow at him. Shut up and enjoy the simulation, Hyung. Jungkook stayed quiet. Until Hoseok turned to him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Jungkook said, that the only thing scarier than failing now is succeeding. Yoongi nodded. Because now it's on us. No one else to blame. Namjoon raised his glass of water. To responsibility. They clinked their paper cups. Later, as they lay on the floor, facing the ceiling, Jungkook whispered something he hadn't said in years. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, I'd finally be worthy. And now? Taehyung asked. Now I know I was never supposed to feel worthy, he said. I was just supposed to make them feel. They slept with the windows open, the night wind filling the room like a lullaby. The next morning, the news came like thunder. BTS's showcase had gone viral. Not just in Korea. Globally. Every clip. Every lyric. Every cry and scream. People weren't just watching, they were feeling it. And then came the unexpected headline. BTS sells out debut showcase encore in under 3 minutes. Encore? They hadn't even agreed to one. Bang Si-hyuk sent a text. You wanted the wheel? Drive. They didn't celebrate. They planned. Because the encore wasn't just a performance. It was the beginning of the legacy. And no one, not labels, not executives, not even fear, was going to write it for them again. No one spoke during soundcheck. The encore venue, a historic amphitheater carved into the hills above Los Angeles, was built to echo glory. But in that moment, it echoed only tension. Jungkook stood center stage, staring into a sea of empty seats that would be filled in hours by thousands. But it wasn't the size that shook him. It was the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just another performance. It was the culmination. The judgment. The last chance to tell the world, we are not your experiment, we are your future. The final rehearsal ended with silence. Namjoon wiped sweat from his brow, pacing by the edge of the stage, muttering under his breath. Jimin sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, humming the opening note on loop. Taehyung and Hoseok sat shoulder to shoulder in the shadows, backs pressed to the wall, saying nothing. Jeon adjusted his earpiece, then removed it. Again. 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 Jeongi stood alone behind the curtain, staring at his hands. That's when Jungkook pulled out the folded piece of paper. It had been in his jacket since the day Bang Si-hyuk handed them the revised contracts. A final clause hastily scribbled in ink on the back page. Any member who breaks performance integrity during a global debut is subject to solo suspension or expulsion from the group. He knew the words by heart. He crumpled the paper and shoved it deep into his back pocket. The sun set, and the noise began. Thousands of fans screamed as the lights dimmed. The air was thick with anticipation, not just for a show, but a reckoning. The internet had devoured every leaked clip, every unedited rehearsal, every whispered rumor about control and mutiny. This was no longer a showcase. This was a revolution. The intro track hit like a thunderclap. Pyrotechnics. Silence. Then, Namjoon's voice. But not the scripted opening. A new verse. A new monologue. He stepped forward under a single spotlight. They told us to sing the chorus of safety. To dance in step with the silence. But we were born to shout through the static. The crowd exploded. Bang Si-hyuk, watching from the VIP box flanked by silent-faced executives, didn't blink. Yoongi's verse hit next. But halfway through, he stopped the music. With one hand, he raised his mic, voice shaking but defiant. No more layers. No more filters. This is who we are. No backing track. No ghost lines. Just us. The crowd fell deathly silent. Then he rapped a cappella. Raw. Ragged. Breathtaking. When Jimin took the stage, his high note cracked just a little. The crowd didn't laugh. They cheered louder. Because it was real. Because it meant he wasn't singing perfection, he was singing truth. Midway through the third track, Taehyung changed the lyrics. Just one line. But it hit like a detonation. The original. They made us into fire so they could watch us burn. His version. We burned the map and lit our own sky. Backstage, the HYB coordinator watching the live feed turned ghost white. They radioed the executive floor, but the reply was static. Hyuk hadn't moved. Not even a twitch. Jin's solo was next. His part had been trimmed in the original set list. But as the crowd chanted his name, Jin, he walked center stage without cue, without light, and sang. A song none of them had rehearsed. One he wrote himself. About the night he almost walked out. About the promise he made to himself in the mirror. About staying even when no one asked him to. People cried. Hoseok's moment came after, not through solo, but through silence. He walked off stage mid-dance, sat on the floor, and simply looked at the audience. Then whispered into his mic. Do you hear it? The quiet when no one's watching? That's where we found ourselves. And then he stood. And danced. Alone. Without beat. Without track. Just the sound of his feet hitting the ground. Until the others joined him, one by one. Then came the last track. The final number. The one that had never been publicly announced. A new song. Co-written by all seven. No producer involvement. No label note. A direct defiance of the final clause in their contract. The song was titled The Seventh Note. A slow piano opened the track. Jungkook stepped forward alone, spotlight dim, voice trembling but unshaken. I was told to be a shadow. But even shadows dream of light. So I ran toward the silence. And found my voice in the fight. His voice soared. And then, silence. Because the music stopped. The feed cut. Power. Gone. Blackout. For a moment, the audience screamed, not in applause, but panic. The amphitheater drowned in darkness. And then, a single flashlight from the crowd. Then another. Then a sea of them. Jungkook looked to Namjoon. Namjoon nodded. They sang anyway. No mic. No lights. No power. They sang in the dark. 7 voices. 1 sound. By the time the power returned, the crowd was already singing with them. Word for word. No lyrics had been posted. No translations given. But the truth didn't need a subtitle. The performance ended with no encore. No bows. They walked off stage in silence, sweat-soaked, pulse pounding. Backstage, the chaos was immediate. Staff panicking. Producers shouting. Phones ringing nonstop. Lara ran to intercept them, breathless. They cut the feed, she said. Mid-broadcast. Company orders. Executives are scrambling. We finished anyway, Yoongi said. That's all that matters. Hyuk entered. Everyone froze. He looked at them. Then, to the shock of everyone, including the staff still trying to salvage the evening, he clapped. Not slow. Not sarcastic. Genuine applause. You burned the stage, he said. No anger. No reprimand. But now, he added, comes the real war. Jungkook stepped forward. We've been at war since day one. Hyuk nodded. You'll be blacklisted from half the networks. Some sponsors may pull. But the world won't forget what they saw tonight. Namjoon held up the paper from his pocket. The contract. He ripped it in half. I'd rather be remembered for what I did than paid for what I didn't. And he dropped it. Hyuk stared at the torn pieces on the floor. You really think you can survive on your own? Jin stepped beside Namjoon. We already are. Later, in the quiet of the after hours, they stood on the rooftop of the venue. No lights. Just breath and stars. Taehyung leaned on the railing. So what now? We rebuild, Namjoon said. Our way. Yoongi passed around 7 envelopes. Inside, blank sheets of staff paper. Write your truth, he said. No edits. No co-writes. No filters. Jungkook took his page, stared at the white space, and smiled. Then let's write a world that never asks us to apologize for being loud. And under the stars, they began to write. Together. Not as idols, but as voices that could never be silenced again.